Britain is leaving Europe. Not politically, not by choice, physically. Right now, as you watch this, the island of Great Britain is drifting away from mainland Europe, a few centimeters every single year. It's not sinking. It's not an earthquake. It's something far stranger. The actual ground beneath London, Edinburgh, and Manchester is riding on a slab of rock that's slowly, silently pulling apart from France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. This isn't a theory. Scientists track it with satellites, and once you understand why it's happening, you'll never look at a map of Europe the same way again, because the story of Britain's slow escape isn't really about Brexit, or politics, or borders at all. It's about something that started 400 million years ago, long before humans, long before Europe even existed as a shape you'd recognize. Let's go there. Here's what most people think they know. Britain is an island because it's surrounded by water. Simple, right? Water in, land out, done. But that explanation is almost embarrassingly incomplete. Water didn't create Britain's separation. It just filled in a gap that was already being carved out by forces you can't see, deep underground, over unimaginable stretches of time. Here's the part that breaks people's brains. Britain and mainland Europe used to be the exact same landmass, not close together, literally connected. You could have walked from what's now London to what's now Paris without ever touching a boat. So if they were once joined, and they're now separated by a sea, what actually pulled them apart? Was it just water rising? Or is there something still happening right now? Something ongoing? Something that never actually stopped? That's what we're digging into. So let's go deeper than anyone has ever taken you before. Everything on Earth's surface, continents, oceans, mountains, sits on giant slabs of rock called tectonic plates. Think of them like puzzle pieces floating on a slow-moving conveyor belt of molten rock. Underneath, Britain sits on the edge of the Eurasian plate, the same massive plate that carries most of Europe and Asia. But sitting on the same plate doesn't mean glued together forever. Plates aren't solid, unchanging blocks. They stretch, they crack, they shift at their edges, especially near old fault lines. And Britain happens to sit right near one of those ancient stress points. Here's the part most textbooks skip. The forces pulling at Europe's crust aren't uniform. They're stronger in some places than others, like pulling on a stretched piece of dough that's thinner in one spot. That spot, geologically speaking, runs right along what's now the English Channel and the North Sea. Over millions of years, this stretching thinned the crust there, making it weaker, easier to crack, easier to sink, easier for water to eventually claim. But here's the part that nobody talks about. This stretching never actually stopped. It's still happening. Right now. The final, dramatic piece of the puzzle happened much more recently, geologically speaking. About 8,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, massive ice sheets that had locked up huge amounts of the planet's water started melting. Sea levels rose fast. There was a landmass connecting Britain to mainland Europe called Doggerland, an entire region of hills, rivers, and forests where people once lived and hunted. As the ice melted and sea levels climbed, Doggerland flooded. Britain, already weakened by millions of years of tectonic stretching, was finally completely cut off. Did you know fishermen in the North Sea still occasionally pull up ancient tools and mammoth bones from Doggerland, a lost world sitting under the waves? Here's what they don't tell you in school. Britain separating from Europe wasn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process, and scientists are watching it happen in real time, using GPS satellite networks precise enough to detect movement, measured in millimeters per year. What they've found is that Britain is drifting, very slowly, but measurably, relative to mainland Europe. We're talking about roughly 2 to 3 centimeters a year in certain directions, similar to the rate your fingernails grow. But wait, it gets even more interesting. This kind of tectonic monitoring isn't just academic curiosity. It's the same science used to predict earthquake risk, because these small, continuous movements along old fault lines are exactly the kind of stress buildup that, in more geologically active regions, eventually releases as an earthquake. Britain isn't at serious earthquake risk because these forces are so gradual, and the crust here is old and stable, but the same monitoring techniques used to track Britain's drift are used in far more dangerous fault zones, like California's San Andreas Fault or Japan's subduction zones. Here's the mind-blow moment. The same invisible forces slowly separating Britain from France are, in other parts of the world, the forces responsible for the most destructive earthquakes and tsunamis in human history. Britain just happens to be experiencing an extremely slow, extremely safe version of a process that can be catastrophic elsewhere. You've probably never thought about it, but this is the same tectonic science behind why California has earthquakes, why Iceland has volcanoes, and why the Himalayas are still growing taller every year. It's all the same underlying mechanism: plates shifting, stretching, colliding, just at wildly different speeds and intensities. Next time you look at a world map, remember, it's not a fixed picture. It's a single frame from an extremely slow-motion movie that's been running for hundreds of millions of years and will keep running long after we're gone. This tectonic monitoring technology also has very immediate, practical uses today. The same GPS-based crust tracking systems used to detect Britain's drift are used to improve early warning systems for earthquakes, to monitor volcanic activity before eruptions, and even to refine how accurately your phone's GPS pinpoints your location, because scientists need to account for the fact that the ground itself is moving. And this is just the beginning of how deep this goes. Now here's something most people never connect to this topic. Britain drifting from Europe is part of a much bigger pattern. Every continent on Earth is moving. Right now, Australia is drifting northward faster than almost any other landmass, so fast that its GPS coordinate system has had to be officially updated multiple times because the whole country had physically moved enough to throw off satellite navigation. Meanwhile, Africa is slowly splitting in two, with a massive crack forming in East Africa that, scientists predict, will eventually create a new ocean, separating a chunk of the continent entirely. Think of Earth's surface like a jigsaw puzzle, sitting on a barely moving conveyor belt. You'd never notice it move in your lifetime, but zoom out to a timescale of millions of years, and every piece is constantly rearranging itself. Britain's slow escape from Europe isn't an isolated oddity. It's one small piece of a planet-wide process that's been running since Earth's crust first formed, and will keep running long after every current coastline, border, and country name has been forgotten. Let's bring it all together. Britain and Europe were once the same landmass, connected by land you could walk across. Ancient tectonic stretching thinned the crust between them, and rising sea levels 8,000 years ago finished the job by flooding Doggerland. And this separation never actually stopped. It's still happening today, tracked by satellites, millimeter by millimeter. Here's the big takeaway. Every map you've ever looked at is just a snapshot of a planet that never stops moving. Now I want to know, did you ever realize continents are still drifting apart in your lifetime, right now, as you read this? Drop it in the comments. In our next video, we're going somewhere even most engineers haven't thought about: how the ground beneath your own house is constantly shifting, and why some of the world's tallest buildings are engineered to sway on purpose. This is Logivra. The logic behind everything is closer than you think,